Well, it's interesting too, because with so many single mothers coming up, like the chance of this dowry happening is like negative 1,000.
No, if it did happen, at least in the more recent history, that would be an illegitimate child.
What would happen to them?
So back then it was really different. Like nowadays, we do this thing where we take a child who's illegitimate and we make them legitimate, which means they have rights of inheritance and all this stuff in probate court. Back then, an illegitimate child, you're not going to legally inherit. No.
No way.
Yeah, so you have this illegitimate child. It doesn't count, and the church was strict on this too. There was no genetic tests back then either. But let me tell you something: adoption wasn't even legal until relatively recently.
No way.
The church outlawed adoption, and from ancient Rome, from whenever Christianity became the sort of state religion, all the way up and through like 1850 or so, adoption was illegal. They were very specific about what marriages can happen.
So what would happen to the kids whose parents died?
Well, they probably end up in some kind of orphanage or
okay.
But so it's interesting when you look at it, because what happens is back then, like let's say you married someone and she was barren or she couldn't have kids. Mm-hmm. You couldn't really know that before. They would maybe marry a concubine who's not a wife, but she can provide a child and he or she could be made legitimate. The church outlawed concubinage when they became monogamous.
So it almost helped the infertile woman because, like in a way, because she still gets to stay married instead of getting divorced.
If you look up what organization on the planet owns the most property, guess what do you think it is?
I'm thinking Bill Gates.
It's the Catholic Church.
Oh no! I should have been able to guess.
The Catholic Church owns the most property. Because what would happen is you'd end up with people who didn't have heirs to pass it on to, and they would gift it to the church. So when they outlawed adoption, so you couldn't adopt somebody to get to pass it on, you couldn't have a concubine, about 20% of people wouldn't have kids in Europe, and another 20% would only have daughters. So that particular daughter, if she didn't get married, she would have a really nice dowry because she's inheriting everything. It's not just her portion. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so it's an interesting history. So you can kind of see how that forms Europe and what's different about it. But the part to where we get to today is nowadays you'll see all kinds of strange things. You'll have a kid out of wedlock, and then as soon as the child support agency makes that kid a legal child, now this kid has claims to certain things. That's why sometimes
historically that would never happen. Because
no.
It would just be the parent.
Yeah, well, this kid would be a bastard. It'd probably be pretty hard to prove that, first of all.